So, the topic today is the last topic, combustion of a carbon particle. So, in a coal combustion, so this also applies to any other solid fuel such as biomass, wood, etc. So, here you can see that the a solid fuel generally a coal or biomass, they are called a charring solid fuel and they are heterogeneous in nature. Okay. Let us take coal. Coal is commonly used in several power plants. Basically in India, a lot of power plants use coal as the fuel, and coal is a heterogeneous fuel. See, for example, if you take liquid fuel that exists in liquid phase, gaseous fuel in gaseous phase. But if there are more than one phase in a particular fuel itself, then such a fuel is heterogeneous in nature. So, why coal is heterogeneous is because of the 4 constituents it has. So, you can see that it has moisture. Okay, coal basically it's formed underground, and you can the vegetation, plant and animal waste, they are buried under the earth for a long time, and they are subjected to high pressures and temperatures of the earth. So, eventually they form the fuel called coal, and once they are once the coal is evolved, basically a lot of water content is trapped inside it. So, it is liquid water, so moisture is trapped inside it. Then a lot of gaseous substances are trapped inside it, they are called volatiles. And how much time the coal remains, the vegetation remains underground and the coal is evolved, that will basically fix the amount of carbon it has, the fixed carbon, graphite. So, that is the fixed carbon content what it has. Then it will have also a lot of inert minerals which is called ash. So, these are the 4 constituents of coal. What is there? So, in any fuel like a charring fuel, like coal or biomass, we will have these 4 contents, but they will vary. Okay, the best quality coal will have about say 96 to 98% of fixed carbon. So, when the carbon content is very high, that will actually give the higher rank to the coal. Okay, the pure carbon is the best the graphite fuel what we have, solid fuel, but we do not have pure carbon. We will have based upon the amount of time the vegetation spends inside the earth and subject to high temperature and pressure. Based upon this is actually based upon the location of the this earth also. So, you get a very good coal. So, anthracite for example will have very high amount of fixed carbon. But if you take say bituminous, then you can have what is called lignites, etc. So, there are several varieties of coals. They are ranked basically upon based upon the carbon content, and when the carbon content decreases, you will see that there will be an increase in volatiles. Okay, based upon the region where it is obtained, there can be good amount of moisture content also inside it. Basically, if you take Indian coals have very high amount of ash, say about 30 to 50% ash in Indian coals. So, this is also one of the important characteristics. So, high ash coals, Indian coals are high ash coals, and so you can see the heterogeneous nature of the coal. It has a moisture content, gaseous things trapped inside it, then fixed carbon which is pure graphite, and the ash. And basically based upon the rank of the coal, where it is available, etc., you will get these components, the fractions of these components varying, and how to find the mass percentages of these components. We do what is called proximate analysis. When I do a proximate analysis, we will determine the mass weightage of these components. So, for example, I will say 5% moisture by mass, then volatile say 20%, and fixed carbon 60%, and so on. So, basically if you see this proximate analysis works on a simple principle. First you take some samples of coal and heat it to around 1000 degrees uniformly. So, what happens is after this when the temperature is slightly more than 100 degrees centigrade, you can see that the moisture will evaporate. So, we evaporate and leaves. So, there will be a slight mass loss. Okay. So, normally you also record the mass of the sample versus say you can say temperature. So after the mass will be 100% and after some time there will be a slight reduction in mass. So if you see what is the mass loss, that will be the mass corresponding to that of the moisture. Then you heat it more when the temperature range is about say 350 to 450 degrees centigrade. So after that there will be no mass change. Then when the temperature increases to 350 to 400 degrees, so this will be the 100 degrees point, and when the temperature reaches say 350 degrees, something like that, there will be another mass loss which will indicate the release of the gaseous fuels which is trapped inside the coal. So those fuels, or for example you can see the variety of fuels: methane, carbon monoxide, hydrogen, some hydrocarbons like C2H2, then some oxygen also will be there, nitrogen also will be present inside. So these gases are trapped inside the coal, and they will be released when the coal is heated to this. So you can see there will be another mass loss, and then the mass will remain constant. So with these two processes, basically when you want to release moisture or when you want to release volatiles, you may heat it in an inert medium like a nitrogen, hot nitrogen gas. You may heat it in an inert medium. Just it will be, so it's only a thermal process. Okay, releasing of moisture, releasing of volatile will be only a thermal process, which is generally called pyrolysis. Heating up the coal sample will result in the release of moisture at a certain temperature range, say 100 to 110 degrees centigrade, and a little of the gaseous components trapped inside the solid fuel, which are called volatiles, at a higher temperature range, say 350 to 450 degrees centigrade. So by doing so, you will get the amount of so you know the initial mass and you know the masses at when the volatile is released, etc. Now what is remaining will be the fixed carbon plus ash. So this fixed carbon and the mineral material which is called ash, they are together called char. In general, they are together called char, and this char will not convert at all. If you just use inert gas, hot inert gas, whatever be the temperature, only if you use inert gas, it will not convert at all. So it will just show as a straight line after that. So if you do inert, but if you start supplying oxygen, then what happens is the carbon will now burn with oxygen to form carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, etc. So then if you use after a particular temperature, say this is around say 900 degrees centigrade to 1000 degrees centigrade, you will get a mass loss again. So this is in oxidizer medium, oxygen medium, or air medium, for example. Then there will be a mass loss. Then this mass will correspond to the mass of the carbon. So this will be mass of volatiles and so on. Now after that, what will be the rise in temperature? You heat it further. What will be the rise in temperature? The mineral material ash is inert, so it will not convert at all. So that will remain as the residue. Okay, so this is the way you do. This is also called thermogravimetric analysis. So by doing this thermogravimetric analysis or proximate analysis, you will be able to know what is the moisture content, volatile content, that is the trapped gases, and the fixed carbon content, as well as the mineral content in the heterogeneous solid fuel. It may be coal or biomass. Okay, so if you see, it's a very complex fuel when compared to, we have dealt with the gaseous fuels and liquid fuels so far. You can see that this is very complicated. In this you can see that there is a thermal process called pyrolysis, which has to be done to release the moisture, to release the volatiles, etc. The volatiles, once they are released, they should now mix with the ambient air and form reaction zones, homogeneous reaction zones, or what we call gas phase reaction zones, and that will further heat up the solid, which is the leftover fixed carbon and the ash, and they will now heat up to a particular temperature, say around 900 to 1000 degrees centigrade. Then they will start converting, and the conversion of carbon, burning of carbon, is not a simple gas phase reaction. So what happens, there is a carbon surface. So this I call, say, carbon surface, and oxygen from the ambient diffuses towards the carbon surface and a surface reaction takes place. Okay. So surface reaction takes place. So you can see that the burning of carbon itself is not a straightforward process. It's very tough to really understand how the carbon burns, especially when ash is present. And once you have a solid fuel like coal, once this trapped moisture, trapped volatiles, etc. are released, you can see that there will be pores which are formed. Okay. So now what happens is there is a porous diffusion of the ambient gases into the solids and so on. So it's a very complicated process, burning process here. So we have to really make a lot of assumptions to understand and analyze the results. In summary, you will see that coal is a fuel which is a complicated fuel which is heterogeneous in nature because of the fact that there are liquid components like moisture, gaseous components like volatiles, and graphite, pure graphite will be present, fixed carbon, plus there will be inert minerals which are called ash. Now, by doing proper characterization using either TGA or proximate analysis, we will know the mass fractions of these components. Now, if you see, the moisture does not participate in any reaction, it is only again water vapor which is coming out, but the volatiles which are coming out, they are constituted like say by methane, carbon monoxide, hydrogen, C2H2, etc. So now we can see that these will react in the gas phase. And they will form homogeneous reaction zones or gas phase reaction zones, which will be further helpful in heating the solid fuel itself. So, and we know how the mixture of gases will burn in the gas phase. We have already seen how the fuel will burn. In homogeneous reactions are easy to really analyze. So, we know how to do this. And also, especially when there is a carbon bed and the volatiles are released and oxygen comes from the ambient, diffuses into these, mixes with the volatiles and burn in a diffusion mode or non-premix mode, it is easy to really analyze the homogeneous reaction zones. However, the carbon itself, fixed carbon itself, will burn in a surface reaction mode, and for this we need to understand certain other things also, which we will see now. So now the burning of carbon is the slowest process. So that will be the rate limiting step in the coal combustion. So we have to understand the burning of carbon thoroughly. So that will be the topic which we will cover now. So this is not going to be applicable only for coal. Please understand that it may be a biomass. Biomass also will have some amount of carbon. For example, biomass will not have like a higher amount of carbon like that of coal, anthracite or etc. However, if you see, it may have say 20 to 30% of fixed carbon and so on, based upon again what is the type of biomass what we deal with and so on. So again there also the carbon combustion is the rate limiting. So we have to understand the burning of carbon. So combustion of carbon. Okay. So the combustion of carbon is the rate limiting step in any solid fuel combustion, not only coal, any solid fuel combustion. As I told you, this will involve surface reactions. Okay. So if you take gases like O2, CO2 and H2O, they will diffuse, as I told you, they will diffuse to the surface of the carbon, and if you see that the carbon will be heated to a temperature where this surface reaction can take place. Okay. So for example, if it is heated to say 900 degrees plus, say 900 degrees or 1000 degrees, something like that, then based upon the temperature of this carbon particle, what happens is the surface reactions are going to be triggered. Please understand that these reactions, surface reactions, are heterogeneous in nature, because please understand that there is a solid surface and these gases diffuse towards surface and penetrate in the surface basically, and the surface reaction takes place based upon the temperature of the particle at the surface. So obviously you can see these are all, wherever I put C here, they are all graphite. So on the surface, now O2 diffusing to the surface will react with C and produce CO2. So that means CO2 will be formed at the surface. Similarly, there are locations where CO also can be formed at the surface. Predominantly, basically CO actually will be formed. Then CO will go to the gas phase, react with oxygen to form CO2. The CO2 diffuse to the surface, or the CO2 formed at the surface also can again diffuse further, and it will react with the carbon to form CO. Similarly, water vapor, which is either released from the coal or which is formed due to the combustion of the volatiles, can diffuse towards the surface, and C plus H2O reaction can trigger to give CO plus H2. Again, H2 will go to the gas phase, react with oxygen to form H2O, H2O penetrates inside, and this is the reactions. So, these are all reactions occurring at particle surface. So, surface reactions, the heterogeneous in nature, because we have a solid and a gas which is coming in. So, these reactions are will not take place in again very complicated. These are global reactions basically. Again there will be some steps to involve, and these are all primarily classified as first order reactions. And if you see this, the amount of the gases which are going to be penetrated into the surface plus the surface temperature, pressure, etc., will dictate the reaction rates. Okay. So, the surface temperature, say Ts, then the pressure and the concentration of the gases, say I will say if it is O2 or CO2 or H2O, the concentration of the gases. So, these will affect the reaction rates. Okay. Now, what happens is it's not a just when I say heterogeneous reaction, I mean that there should be something called absorption of gases to the surface, then the reaction takes place, then the desorption, that means the product which is formed that should be released away from the surface. So, this the absorption of the reactant gas into the surface, then the surface reaction occurring of the surface reaction, then the desorption where the products which are formed on the surface are released to the gas phase. So, these are the steps involved in the heterogeneous reactions. Okay. Now, if you see this, predominantly you can see CO is formed. So, the global surface reactions which are given above predominantly produce CO. So, the CO which is produced here will again go to the gas phase to react with O2 to form CO2. You can see this is a gas phase homogeneous reaction. Okay. Other reactions are also there. Similarly, H2 which is formed here can go to a gas phase to form H2O. Similarly, CO plus H2O in the gas phase can react to form CO2 plus H2. Then methane, etc. So, again volatiles, these are all the products which are formed within the surface, they are going to the gas phase and reacting. Volatiles which have CH4, C2H2, etc., that also will have gas phase reaction. So, that is known. So, these are the reactions homogeneous in nature, because these are gaseous products which are going out. If they have a fuel component, that will react with the oxygen available in the atmosphere, and that will also produce the gas phase reactions. It is a combination of homogeneous plus heterogeneous reactions, and we have to understand, but the main focus should be on how the heterogeneous reactions here take place. So, that is the main thing. So, as I told you, surface reactions are very complex, okay? Especially due to the porous nature of the char or the carbon particle itself. As the trapped moisture, trapped volatiles are released, they will come out, they will create some pores. Already the coal itself can be porous. Further, due to the release of these components, volatile and moisture components, you can see there will be a porosity involved, and due to which a phenomenon called intraparticle diffusion, within the particle there will be diffusion which can take place. So, this is a very complex, and modeling cannot be done, or even any theoretical or numerical modeling is very complicated to do, including the intraparticle diffusion. But we can have, we need not even do this, we can understand the overall way to analyze by using the species and energy balances. That is what we are going to concentrate on. However, the point we have to stress here is we need to understand first of all how the reaction takes place, what is formed in the surface. So, there are several models which are involved to analyze this. We will just quickly see what are they. So, simplified models for understanding carbon combustion are mainly three. First one is called one film model, and the second one is called two film model, and the third one is called continuous film model. It's a simplified models. Okay. So, we will just use the species energy balances etc., and try to do this. So, there are again we will see lot of assumptions are involved in all these models. Let us take one by one. We will see in detail the one Philly model and some features of the two Philly model in this particular lecture. So, one Philly model assumes that complete oxidation of carbon occurs at the surface where oxygen penetrates into it. So, that means C plus O2 will occur to form CO2 at the surface itself, that is all. So, that is only one at one go, there is a hot carbon surface, oxygen penetrates into this, CO2 is formed, finished, that is all. No other reactions are considered. No other reactions are considered in this. So, that is a very simple model. So, I will read it. Complete oxidation is assumed to occur at the carbon surface, up to which oxygen is going to penetrate. Then CO2 is formed there. Obviously, due to the heat release, maximum temperature is seen at the surface. So, temperature will decrease from the maximum value towards the ambient value. So, this is the one Philly model, the simplest model. Then, however, when measurements are taken very close to the charged surface, the carbon surface etc., you can see that people have seen very less CO2. CO2 should be maximum, correct? But they have seen very less CO2 and they have seen less oxygen also. That means that the oxygen penetration or CO2 formation could not have occurred very near to the surface. So, keeping that in mind, people have postulated what is called two film model, in which first CO2 is produced at the surface. So, that is what the reactions also indicate. You can see 3 out of the 4 reaction forms CO, indicates the CO formation at the surface, correct. So, this is more realistic model, but again when you try to increase the complexity, the analysis also become complex. So, here what happens is CO is produced at the surface, but this is due to the reaction between C plus CO2. This reaction, third reaction, C plus CO2 giving 2CO, that reaction triggers at the surface. So, surface reaction between the hot carbon surface and the CO2 which is penetrated from the gas phase inside to the surface, that will take place to produce CO. Now, the CO will diffuse towards the ambient, react with O2 and form CO2. This is called two film. So, the first is the formation of CO due to the penetration of CO2 from the ambient, which is formed at the ambient, and it penetrates into the surface, hot surface, CO is formed. Then the CO goes to the surface, forms CO2, and this is going to be the two films here. Okay. So, there is a two regions. So, one is surface and the flame, where CO is oxidized to CO2, that is the thin flame sheet. So, that and the surface, that will be one region. Then from the thin flame to the ambient, there will be second region. So, there will be two film what we call. First film or inner region, second film is the outer region. Okay. So, this basically is the two film model. Then continuous film model, there is no distinct flame zone. So, what it assumes is there is a carbon surface and there is a boundary layer. Within the boundary layer, everything is over, the reactions are over, then ambient comes. So, within the boundary layer, what happens is the formation, all the 4 reactions take place basically here in the boundary layer, and the combustion is complete. So, that is the continuous film model. There is no distinct flame zone and the reaction is assumed to be spread over a boundary layer present over the carbon particle. So, these are the 3 models which are available. We will go into detail of one film model because we can see some insights of the controlling parameters etc. Then we will also see some basics of two film model in this course. Okay, now one film model. Again, any theoretical model we have to make several assumptions, which many of them you know now because we have done already the diffusion flames, droplet combustion etc. So, based upon that, similar type of assumptions will be there. Here the carbon particle is assumed to be spherical because I want to use a spherical coordinate here. So, the carbon particle and spherically symmetric. So when there is a flame form, it is also spherical in nature. So this will be say RS, surface, radius, and this will be RF. So exactly what we saw in the droplet combustion, similar thing we will assume here. There will be a radius for the carbon particle and there will be a radius for the flame. So spherically symmetric, only one coordinate is radius here. So that will be the assumption, first assumption made, and there is no convection. So stagnant ambient. Burning is quasi steady. The burning rate is constant. So this is what this quasi steady means. Okay, then in the one film model, as I told you, only one shot carbon and oxygen reacts to form CO2, finished. So oxygen comes to the hot carbon surface and converts into CO2, and heat release happens, maximum temperature prevails there. So in the gas phase, obviously air and CO2 will be present. So air is O2 plus N2 and CO2. So these are the three species which we will consider here. Then usual assumptions: thermal conductivity, specific heat, and the rho d, product of density and mass diffusivity, are constants. Apart from that, Lewis number also is taken as 1. Then the tough part for the surface reactions, etc., only till the surface the oxygen can penetrate and it should consume that. Please understand, unlike for the gases penetrating into a liquid droplet, they should dissolve, but we have assumed it is not going to dissolve. So there is no net mass flux for the gases, other gases, correct, which will come to the surface of the droplet. But here oxygen penetrates to the surface and reacts there. So that difference you have to keep in mind. But anyway, it is not going to again go into the pores, and the intra particle diffusion, etc., are not considered. It is very complex and not required also. So impervious to the gases, including O2. So this is very important assumption, which is actually should be made to make the problem simpler. Now another assumption is the particle is heated up. The particles are small in nature, small in size, so that when the particle is heated up, the surface temperature is everywhere inside the particle. So there is no heat transfer required to be solved within the particle. So particle is of uniform temperature. Okay, now another assumption, please understand that when the carbon particle burns, it will be red hot. So there will be radiation from the particle surface. So please understand, these are all reduction reactions here basically. So even though this CO plus C plus O2 is oxidation, then C plus CO2, C plus H2, they are reduction reactions. So what happens is the particle should be at very high temperature. When the carbon particle is at a very high temperature, it is incandescent. The hotness will be reflected by the bright red color. So the radiation has to be taken into account. Okay, now when radiation has to be taken into account, we have to make some assumption about the body. It is not a black body, so it should be taken as a grey body where the emissivity is taken as constant. So it will not depend on wavelengths and so on. So a grey body assumption is made, and the carbon particle radiates the heat to the ambient as a grey body. So that assumption is made. So when you solve for heat balances, radiative heat transfer also is accounted here. These are the assumptions made to simplify the otherwise complex problem, and I will talk about the profiles, typical profiles. As I told you, this is the surface, RS is the radius of the carbon particle, where all the reactions are going to be over. That is only one reaction that will be over here. Inside this, the temperature is uniform. You can see there is no variation in temperature, and surface temperature is Ts here. And from the surface, the temperature, that is the maximum temperature, because there the reaction is going to occur, and you can see that the temperature drops to the ambient temperature in a non-linear manner. Similarly, oxygen from the ambient diffuses into the surface, okay, and it is consumed there, but please understand, it is not completely consumed. Okay, so based upon the reaction rate, okay, based upon the reaction rate, which is dependent on Ts, okay, again the oxygen concentration and pressure, okay, and concentration of O2, the reaction rate will be specified. So based upon the reaction rate, there will be some value of mass fraction of oxygen at the surface. It cannot be 0. When the temperatures are higher and higher, then it will tend to 0. The YO2 at S will tend to 0. Okay. Now carbon dioxide is produced at the surface, so it is maximum there, and when it is desorbed, then it is again going to be transported to the gas phase, both convection and this diffusion. So here also you can see that since O2 comes to the surface and get consumed here, this O2 also is transported by both convection and diffusion. Okay. So unlike the oxidizer penetrating penetrating towards the flame, or in the evaporation case, when the droplet is evaporating, then the ambient gas penetrates to the surface, but it will not be consumed there. So net flux is 0. So only with diffusion the gas comes to the surface when the droplet evaporates. In this case, oxygen comes to the surface, when it since it reacts, there will be a net flux for that also. So this is the important thing we should understand, the structure of the one film model. So a very simplified model where we have only one plane where the reaction is complete, that is at the surface, and the surface reaction is C plus O2 giving CO2, and you can see that maximum temperature and the product is will be maximum at the surface, and they are transported away. So diffusion, conduction plus radiation also will be there in this. Okay, this heat this profile will be got including both conduction as well as radiation. We will come to that. But the internal conduction, within the solid particle, the conduction is neglected, because we assume that the entire solid will be at the same temperature as that of the surface.